Welcome to another episode of the House Husband Diaries. I am your host, as always, Carter C. And today's a beautiful day here in North Carolina. Repping my Carolina shirt. I got my puppy here. Um, he's wrestling with his stuffed animal. So if you hear stuff in the background, that's just how it's going to be today. And that's why it's the House Husband Diaries, because I'm a house husband and I'm taking care of a puppy right now. And so I thought today I would start with the first episode related to Forrest Fenn's The Thrill of the Chase treasure hunt. So um, for those of you who have never heard of it or just watching the House Husband Diaries because you think I'm awesome, kudos to you. But I kind of dork out over a lot of things. I read a lot of books, and a few years ago, I was wasting a bunch of time on YouTube, and somehow came across this guy named Calazar, as well. His YouTube channel was Calazar's, and his name's Mike Cowling, but he had just started a couple of vlogs. Like maybe I got like the second or third vlog about this treasure hunt called The Thrill of the Chase, Forrest Fenn, out in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And he hid this treasure somewhere in the Rocky Mountains north of Santa Fe. And I was fascinated. I was like, well, I mean, I thought this guy, Mike, did a good job on his vlogs, but I figured, he was really smart. Like the way that he was talking about like puzzles, and there's a whole community of people that do puzzles. And I just figured like they'd find it. And so I was interested in the videos and the vlogs, and I watched maybe the first 6 or 7, maybe 8. I don't know. That was several years ago. I was living in Charleston, South Carolina at the time, and and then as life happens, I forgot completely about the chase. I forgot completely about Forrest Fenn's treasure. I forgot about Calazar's, my Cowling, and as life would have it, I moved up to Boston, Massachusetts last year with my wife's work, and found myself retiring early, and otherwise known as becoming a house husband, and basically was like, I don't know, something hit me in my mind, and I was like, man, I wonder if that guy's still doing those vlogs, and I also wonder if anybody's ever found that treasure. So I checked up, and sure enough, Mike's still doing the vlogs, and he has a partner now, Christy, K-Pro. So any of you that are treasure hunters and watch YouTube, you'll know that it's K-Pro and Cal. Coffee with K-Pro and Cal. I don't have coffee today, but cheers. And yeah. So fast forward however many months, I got to meet Christy a few months ago. My wife and I moved back to North Carolina a few months ago, and so I got to go to the Raleigh area meetup, and it was really fun. I've been following the chase from afar for 3 years maybe, and I figured I've got some time. I've got the House Husband Diaries going, and I'm interested in the thrill of the chase and the treasure hunt. Whether I'll ever do a boots on the ground or not remains to be seen. I mean, last year, around this time in October, actually, so about 13 months ago, I was driving across the country because I had some time before I officially moved to Boston. And I drove right through Wyoming, Montana, North and South Dakota. I know North and South Dakota aren't in the search area, but I drove through all of that area through Yellowstone, and like completely had forgotten about it. So like never looked for it up there. It was only once I got back to Boston that I remembered about Mike and the treasure hunt and stuff. So anyway, I bought TTOTC, The Thrill of the Chase, and figured I'd just start making some videos, some vlogs, along with the House Husband Diaries, but on this specific topic because it's fun. I've enjoyed seeing the community grow from afar. I really enjoyed the Searcher meetup in Raleigh. I hope we can do it again. And yeah, so I thought I would just kind of make this first video on TTOTC about, and the topic would be this, my search ground rules, right? So everybody has their own search ground rules. So when I went to that meetup in Raleigh, Christy asked me, I mean, she asked everybody at the table, but we went around and she said, you know, like, what is your percentage? I don't remember the exact question. It was something about like, what was your percentage, like poem versus other materials, you know, scrapbooks and everything. And I'm not a poem purist, but I would say that I'm a poem and book purist, with the slight exception of a few quotes here and there. Mainly the Moby Dickens interview from, I don't know, it was 2013 or something. I think that was pretty good, because the chase was small then, or much smaller, and I feel like Forrest was more, he was more open and less guarded, and so I took a lot from that. So really, my number one ground rule for the search is the poem and the book. So read the poem over and over, read the book, go back to the poem, read the book again slowly. Always read it slowly. I don't really read it slowly. I don't know how you read it slowly. Like the ba 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 ba, like whatever. I get what he means, but I basically just read the book, read the poem, read the book, read the poem, and see if I can find any aberrations. And then I try to use my imagination. That's number two. So one, read the poem, read the book, read the poem, read the book. Number two is use my imagination. I mean, he says in the cover of the book, I'm looking at it here, and it says, let's see here. It says, all that will be needed are the clues, some resolve, a little imagination, and maybe a six-pack to help celebrate the thrill of a breathtaking discovery. Pretty sure I got the six-pack down. I have a wicked imagination. Wicked, yeah, because I came from Boston. It's wicked. But nobody knows what the 9 clues are. I'm a 9 lines, 9 clues kind of guy, because it's just ease of, like, simplification, right? So I'll get to that. I mean, Forrest has said simplify, and I really think simplify. It's got to be more talking about just look at each line. But anyway, so I have a very active imagination, and what I think is interesting is I don't think when people say, oh, well, I'm using my imagination, some people say, oh, well, don't complicate it, because Forrest has said simplify, don't complicate. Well, I don't think using your imagination necessarily complicates things, right? So imagination can be simple. I think when Forrest was talking about don't complicate things, try to simplify it, people were talking about ciphers, codes, all sorts of hidden meanings, symbology. Like that's complication. That's not necessarily imagination. That's a higher level of code breaking knowledge that I don't think Forrest was really aiming at. Could be completely wrong, right? But that's where I get to, and I'll talk about it in the next episode when we start talking about the actual clues. I'll go one through 9, and I'll talk about the poem. But to me, hot springs isn't imaginative. When it says begin it where warm water's hot, hot springs takes zero imagination, right? I mean, just none. Like none. To me, using hot springs as the place where warm water is hot, it could totally be, a hot spring could totally be where warm water is hot, and I would be completely wrong. And Forrest can laugh all day long at me, as well as everyone else. However, to me, where warm water's hot, or like using hot springs as the WWH is it's tantamount to homework, right? So you have umpteen hundreds of thousands of whatever hot springs in the Rocky Mountains, and uh, I guess some people are making lists, and then you just mark them off. Okay, there's no canyon here. There's no uh, home of Brown. There's no whatever you think the different clues are. So you're just knocking off hot springs left and right, and then you're left with 10 or 15 or 20 or 100 different hot springs, and that's your list. That just sounds like homework to me. It's not imaginative. It's not fun. Um, it does get you outside, but for all that Forrest talks about uh, disliking education and not doing well in school and just like liking being outside. I don't know. Like it just doesn't. It doesn't resonate with me. So if the treasure starts at a hot spring, or the treasure hunt starts at a hot spring, or the treasure map, whatever, um, guess who's not going to find it? But guess what? Nobody else has found it in like 9 years. So um, yeah. Um, so I'll go to so then as part of the imagination, I think I covered. He says don't oversimplify. Um, but don't overcomplicate. And I think imagination is somewhere in between, right? So there was a guy that wrote, and I'll butcher the actual quote, but he said, if he wrote in like an email or something, it's on Terry Scant. But if I were to say, meet me somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, meet me where warm water's halt, somewhere in the Rocky Mountains north of Santa Fe, would you be able to meet me there? Or something like that. And Forrest's response was, don't oversimplify the clues. So, then later on, he writes something to people and he says, don't overcomplicate it. So there's an oversimplify, there's an overcomplicate. And I think somewhere in between is this not literal, it's not coded, but it's also not necessarily literal. And when I look at the preface of the Thrill of the Chase book, he admits in that one page, page 4, he admits that, all of these stories are true as one man can average out the truth, considering his natural instinct to embellish just a little. And who doesn't like to embellish, right? I'm a storyteller. If you watch, more of my videos, hopefully that'll come out. I won't be too stiff on camera. But you look down and he says, not only does he like to embellish, but then he says that he tends to use some words that aren't in the dictionary, and others that are, he bends a little. So he's also said, in the book, that if he didn't look up, or if he didn't know a word, he wouldn't use it. But that's not true, because he says, he uses words that aren't in the dictionary. He bends some that are. And then he's told us to look up every word, like look it up. What's the meaning? And so I think there's a lot of imagination that needs to come into play. And we'll get into more of that as we look at the clues, and we'll talk about different definitions of words, and then potential places they could be on a map, and then maybe some imaginative places or things looking at the poem in sort of an imaginary way. Number 3, he says, look at the big picture. There are no shortcuts. And that was the end of the quote where he said, don't oversimplify the clues. Look at the big picture. There are no shortcuts. So to me, the big picture is life. A lot of the stories in the Thrill of the Chase are about life. They're about time. They're about love and family. And they're about history and kind of the meaning of life in its place in history. And what I mean by that is, there's stuff, it's about cancer, him dying, the quotes, traveling. Nobody comes back from this road in darkness, and we'll get into the details in subsequent videos. But it's just really interesting that the big picture. I think maybe the poem has something to do with some of these big picture um, items, big picture issues that maybe are less specific to Hot Springs, so to speak, right at the beginning, and maybe have some sort of historical meaning or larger meaning that that we need to use our imagination and then hone it down to somewhere on a map. So number 4 is the treasure is not associated with a man-made structure. And I'm not sure if he means all of the clues aren't associated with man-made structures, or if just the treasure is not associated with man-made structures. So I'm just kind of taking the route that none of the clues are associated with man-made structures. We'll see. I've got some ideas. I'm using my imagination, and so I'm not really sure if that's just Homa Brown, if it's all clues, if it's just the treasure chest. But we'll see as we get into the clues and later episodes. So then number 5 would be marry each clue to a map, or at least the first 2 clues, because he had talked about the girl in India, theoretically couldn't get closer than the first 2 clues. So you got to be able to marry at least those two to a map. But then he said, but if you knew the geographic location of each clue, it would be a map to the treasure. So I do believe that each clue is a place on a map, or a place in reality. I don't know that a map necessarily, I guess if you got down to like Google Street View, you would call that a map. But I don't know that like a map would have each one of those locations on it. Maybe it would. Maybe you could say, well, that tree is not on the map, but that the geospatial location of that tree is on a map, technically. Okay. Number 6, and it's kind of my final note, is it's all about the thrill of the chase, right? So when we're looking for the treasure, when we're reading the book, when we're reading other things, or reading the poem, I mean, really, I think he wants it to be fun. So we need to have some sort of imagination. I think people are going all kinds of ways, which is fine because we're all kinds of people, right? So everybody's going to take a different approach. And I think there's a big need to respect people. Don't, like, everybody's looking for the treasure. Everybody's, wants to find it. Like, that's great. But I think there's something about just the thrill of the chase that he really means. And we should be thinking more along the lines of, the treasures are the memories. And I think I've heard Kay Pro talk about her specific story of losing a lot of weight and, meeting Mike and just the whole searcher community and Forrest and everything. And I think those are the treasures that, those memories and life experiences that are really important, that we're sort of getting away from in today's technologically driven world. It's so fast paced that being out in nature is really a treasure in and of itself. Meeting good, genuine people is a treasure in itself. And that's part of the thrill of the chase. It's not just about gold and jewels. And so, enjoy each other, enjoy, the mind games, the imagination, whatever it is you do, have fun with the thrill of the chase. And as always, I'll just say at the end, I reserve the right to change or adjust any of these parameters at any time. I mean, that's just sort of par for the course, right? I mean, I could find something that that totally changes what I think, but I've kind of been in the shadows for the last couple years, and I feel pretty good about these 6 ground rules for the search. And as I said earlier, I'm a 9 lines, 9 clues kind of guy, just for simplification. And ultimately, the bottom clues just don't matter if we can't find where warm water's halt, if we don't know which canyon to take it down, and if we don't know how far, but too far to walk is. And then obviously the home of Brown. So the rest of the clues don't matter at all if we don't know the first one to begin with. But I'll leave it there for this episode, and then next episode we'll pick it up with the first line of the second stanza, which is the first clue, begin it where warm water salt. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next episode.